So just before we get into this video guys, as always, I just want to say I want to hit 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel already and you do enjoy the content, then make sure that you hit that subscribe button and I'd love you forever. So today I thought I would do another top 3 because I enjoy doing them. And I do kind of want to rattle through the Doctors at this point. So I thought I would head back to the new series and talk about my top 3 worst of the 12th Doctor's era. Now, here's the thing with Peter Capaldi's era. I do love him as the Doctor, but I do think his era is very 50-50, and even though I do personally feel like he does have some incredible stories and he is fantastic in them, he also has some pretty crap stories. And as always, this is just my opinion, so if you happen to disagree, get over it, doesn't matter. This is just my opinion. I'm not trying to dictate what stories you should or shouldn't like. And actually, this video might surprise you because I have omitted a story that most people would think would be on here. And also, as usual, this is not in any particular order. I'm just talking about the 3 stories. So, let's get into it. First and foremost, In the Forest of the Shite. Sorry, I mean Night. Now, this story from Series 8 is atrocious. It's one of those where, I mean, I've said this quite a lot recently and for a fair few years now, actually. Doctor Who can be bad. It absolutely can. And it has been throughout its entire run. But the one thing that I cannot excuse is when Doctor Who is boring. And that is exactly what In the Forest of the Night is. I must say, I do quite like the idea of this story, the fact that it's meant to be almost like a fairy tale type thing, but I don't think it quite works. The execution is not there. The fact that trees just spring up from everywhere is quite an interesting idea, but it goes nowhere. And again, it's one of those Doctor Who stories where it doesn't really feel like the Doctor needs to be involved. It just feels like there's a story there for the sake of it. It doesn't really feel like it needed to be a Doctor Who story on television. I mean, if Big Finish maybe want to tackle it, or a novel or something like that, I can kind of see it. But on TV, this story is not good enough. Like, a zoo is going to be broken apart because of the trees and the animals escape. Okay, that's fine. But then after the trees disappear, then what happens? It doesn't really feel like anybody is that bothered that there's like tigers and lions and shit roaming about London. It just doesn't feel like they address that whatsoever. You've got the kid actor in this, as in like the main kid actor, the fairy kid, who is atrocious and keeps doing this stuff, and it's just bizarre. Got that awful ending where they just resolve everything because the trees decided to be good again or some shite like that. And then there's the girl in the bush. This story baffles me every single time I see it, which I must say is not a lot. This is never a story that I want to revisit, and I've got to say it is probably the weakest story of Capaldi's run. No, it isn't. But at least Series 8 it is. And that's saying something, because Kill the Moon, right, if you're watching, even though you are a fictional episode of a TV programme, you are so lucky not to be on this list because it's that close. But at least the build up to the awful bit is actually pretty good. Whereas this one, I don't really find any positives. And also, it is a Clara Danny focused episode. I've already stated on this channel before, I think that relationship in general is just a pile of crap. So yeah, this is atrocious. Next up then, we're going to go to Series 10. And thinking about it, all of the episodes on here are from a different series. So the Series 10 one is going to be the Monk Trilogy. The Monk Trilogy really frustrated me because I've got to say I was very excited for the entire thing. I like the ideas, I like some of the concepts, but it just doesn't quite work. And again, I think I've said this in videos before, specifically about these episodes, it definitely feels like multiple writers wrote each of the 3 parts, which was in fact the case, but they shouldn't feel like they were written by 3 separate people because they don't really feel like there's a plan there. It's just like, right, I'll start this part, then you take over, but don't tell me what you're doing because it doesn't really matter. That's how it comes across. The first part, Extremis, a lot of people seem to really like that first part. I don't, because it is basically that old trope of, oh, it was just a dream, even though it is like, oh, it was a simulation. That's rubbish to me. Even though the stuff that it's doing is a good thing, it's just like, oh, hypothetically, this is what would happen. Like, we're planning the invasion, but it's not really happening yet. Like, how about instead of you making it a dream or a plan or a hypothetical, actually fucking do it? The second part, I think, is the strongest, but even then that's not really a compliment because it's not incredible. I do like where it leads. I do like the fact that the Doctor's blindness is played up upon in it, again with Extremis as well, but it doesn't really go anywhere. It kind of feels like the only reason why they did the Doctor's blind now thing was just because it seemed like a good cliffhanger for one episode and to keep viewers interested, but they didn't really do enough with it. And then the last part, I think the first few minutes, I like where it is, and I like the setting, and I like the situation and all that sort of stuff, but we get a fake out regeneration, we get a load of stuff with Bill and her mum, but that doesn't really feel like it's fully developed, so I don't really care. The Monk designs, I think, are really, really cool. They're very Pertwee era, in my opinion, but at the same time, this whole story doesn't really feel coherent, and it does take up a big chunk of series 10. It's about a quarter of the entire series, and it doesn't really feel as epic as I imagine the writers thought it was. I think Capaldi's fantastic in it with what he's given, but he really isn't given all that much. And I must say, I do actually like Matt Lucas in this story as well. I think the bit where they realise it's a simulation and he puts his hand on the thing, he's like, oh, Bill, I really like his acting there. And to be fair, actually, Pearl Mackie's pretty good as well, but there's just nothing meaty for them to dig into. It just feels like a half-cooked story. And actually, no, it's very much too many cooks spoil the pot. That's what this story feels like, and it was a massive, massive letdown. Now, most people would expect me to talk about Hellbent, but I'm not going to, because I think in recent years, I've kind of looked at it as the second part of Heaven Sent, and I don't really want to include Heaven Sent with Hellbent. I try to disassociate them, but the reality is they are connected. So I'm not going to have it here, even though Hellbent on its own is an atrocious episode. But then again, I think what it's trying to do, it does well. It's just doing the wrong thing. So instead, I'm actually going to talk about the very first story of Series 9, which is The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. I've said quite a few things about this story on this channel for quite a few years now, and I stand by everything. So if I'm repeating myself here, I do apologise, but still, this is shite. The whole first part of this story is building up to the story, and for me that's a load of shit, because just start the story where it needs to be started. Like, you don't need Bill, sorry, not Bill, Clara, you don't need Unit, you don't even need Missy. All that sort of stuff is pointless and it goes nowhere. Like the stuff with Missy's introduction with the planes and like her big head in the unit headquarters, that doesn't need to be there. You're just wasting the runtime. The stuff with the Doctor on the tank, I think, is embarrassingly bad. When they finally get to Skaro and then we see some of that stuff, you've got all these different classic Daleks and different types of Daleks, and it is purely there for fan service. There's no reason as to why all these different Daleks are there. The stuff with Davros and the Doctor is really, really good up to a point. I'll get to that in a sec. But the stuff with the young Davros, I really think should have been the backbone of this story, and it just isn't. Even though that the kid actor isn't great, I still think if you had the material there, you can kind of look past that sort of stuff. But going back to the stuff with the older Davros, it's so predictable and it is so dull in the end, because I really would have liked it for Davros as a character to actually die and at the end change his ways, because at the end of the day, Doctor Who's a time travel show. You can kill off Davros and still have hundreds of adventures later on with the younger version of Davros who isn't dying. But not only that, it's the bit where he opens his eyes, because that just makes no sense and totally undermines everything that Terry Nation was going for with the character all the way back in 1975. This is a guy who was literally blinded by war, and that's where his viewpoint comes from. So for him to just suddenly open his eyes because he had them shut the entire time because they hurt a bit, nonsensical bollocks. There's definitely some good moments here and there, but overall this just falls totally flat. I think they tried to sort of suggest that this was like a spiritual sequel to Genesis of the Daleks, especially with the references with the clips, and it just isn't. This pales in comparison. This is a piss poor Dalek story, and a lot of people say that Moffat didn't like writing the Daleks or couldn't write Daleks, and this is the prime example of why. This also introduces us to the sonic sunglasses, which are arguably the worst sonic device that we've ever had. They're cheesy, they're crap. I understand the sentiment behind them, because I think Peter Capaldi was the one who suggested to actually introduce them, but still, they don't really work. They're too gimmicky for me. This is the one Capaldi story out of all of them where I'm like, I never want to see this again. But these are just my top 3 worst Peter Capaldi stories. In the comments below though guys, let me know what you think. Do you agree with my choices? Do you have other suggestions? Whatever it might be, let me know down below. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure that you leave a like on it, subscribe for more. Social media and Patreon links will be in the description as always, so if you'd follow me on any of those things, then I'd absolutely love you forever. But until next time guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye.